Resident Evil 4 Remake is a survival horror video game that has been developed and published by Capcom. It is an updated version of the original Resident Evil 4, released in 2005. The game's storyline follows Leon S. Kennedy, a U.S. government agent who embarks on a mission to rescue the president's daughter from a mysterious cult in Europe. A classic of its time, Resident Evil 4 has gone through improvements in the game's camera angle, graphics, controls, and sound design, giving the game a modern feel while still retaining the classic aspects of the original game, which all makes this remake to be seen as a deserving update, providing gamers with an immersive and engaging experience that will be enjoyed by both new and old fans of the series. This all-in-one review will summarize what makes this title so special. Leon is a former police officer and protagonist from Resident Evil 2. In this game, he's sent on a mission to rescue the president's daughter, Ashley Graham, who has been kidnapped by a mysterious cult known as Los Illuminados. The cult is led by a charismatic figure named Osmond Sadler. The game is set in a rural village in Spain, where Leon encounters villagers who have been infected by the last plagueis parasite, turning them into violent and aggressive creatures. Throughout the game, Leon fights his way through hordes of infected villagers and cult members, uncovering a sinister plot to spread the last plagueis parasite throughout the world. Although not necessarily a one-to-one conversion of the original game, the story is mostly the same with the exception of subtle changes, such as enhancing the horror elements and providing more background information on a few supporting characters. Back in 2005, Resident Evil 4 represented a departure from the series' traditional survival horror roots in favor of a more action-oriented approach, a path similarly followed by its successors, Resident Evil 5 and Resident Evil 6. When compared to the original game, this remake somewhat tries to bring the overall atmosphere a tad bit closer to the series' earlier iterations in terms of having a heavier horror flair, but make no mistake, the scale still tips in favor of action in the grand scheme of things. Overall, the story of Resident Evil 4 is praised for its tension, atmosphere, and pacing. Reviewers appreciate how the game's narrative unfolds and is revealed gradually through notes, files, and conversations with characters. Additionally, the game's characters, particularly the protagonist Leon, are praised for their depth and development throughout the story, at least compared to the series standards. All that said, the game's dialogue can be a bit cheesy or over the top in traditional Resident Evil fashion, which may not be to everyone's taste. However, a few reviewers criticize the game's lack of innovation and its reliance on previous iterations, noting that it does not add much to the original game's formula and it relies heavily on nostalgia without doing much to update or modernize the story. Nonetheless, these criticisms seem to be relatively minor, as Resident Evil 4 is widely considered a classic game in the survival horror genre, and its remake has been lauded as a worthy experience for all players. Resident Evil 4 Remake is a third-person shooter survival horror game that, although retaining much of the original game's story, atmosphere, and mechanics, this version is regarded as a successful modernization of the original classic gameplay-wise. The game has undergone significant improvements in graphics and visuals, with better lighting and effects that make the game look more realistic and immersive, while still maintaining the core of what made the original Resident Evil 4 such a beloved game. The game features exploration, puzzle solving, and intense combat as players fight off hordes of infected enemies. Controls have also been enhanced, particularly the aiming mechanics, which makes combat more responsive and satisfying. The main addition in this remake in terms of combat is probably the parry mechanic using your combat knife, which, other than its defensive nature, also creates a moment of vulnerability in enemies when timed perfectly. This improvement in controls will allow players to focus more on their strategy and precision in battle, leading to an overall more satisfying experience. The game also features a more dynamic camera system, adding to its tension and horror elements, and most importantly, players can also move while they aim now. New content in this remake includes new enemies, weapons, and side quests. The game is a faithful recreation of the levels, puzzles, and story of the original game, with some minor changes that improve the pacing and flow of the game. This means that players who enjoyed the original game will find a lot to love here, while new players will be able to experience a classic game with modern improvements. The game strikes a good balance between action and horror elements, Providing intense and exciting combat while still maintaining the horror atmosphere the series became known for. Graphics and sound were both areas of praise in this remake. In terms of graphics, many reviewers praised the game's updated visuals, with some describing it as a gorgeous or stunning game, apart from some who noted that the game's facial animations could feel a bit stiff or awkward at times. The game runs smoothly and without any noticeable performance issues, which is impressive given the game's high graphical fidelity. Regarding the sound, many reviewers praised the game's sound design and music, with some noting that the game's atmospheric sounds and music contributed significantly to the game's immersive horror experience. However, a few reviewers did note that some sound effects, particularly gunshots, felt a bit lackluster or underwhelming. Overall, however, the consensus among reviewers seems to be that the graphics and sound in the Resident Evil 4 remake are excellent and contribute significantly to the game's overall quality. Resident Evil 4 Remake is a worthy experience for both new and old fans of the series. The game has undergone significant improvements in graphics, controls, sound design, and camera angles while still retaining the classic aspects of the original game, making it a successful and deserving update to the classic game. The game is praised for its tension, atmosphere, pacing, and its successful modernization of the original classic gameplay. The game strikes a good balance between action and horror elements, providing intense and exciting combat while still maintaining the horror atmosphere of the series. The story might be largely the same as the original title, but the efforts in terms of bringing this classic up to today's standards in terms of gameplay, visuals, and sound are enough to justify the existence of this remake that can be easily recommended to most players. Last but not least, a big shout out to the folks from the Survival Horror Network who kindly allowed their gameplay footage to be used in this video. For a full Resident Evil 4 gameplay in 4K and 60 frames, please check their video linked in the description. And if you like this video, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next all-in-one review.